Mr. Ambassador, what a pleasure to see you in your residence.
Pleasure to meet you as well.
Mr. Ambassador, I got to know you're a fan of biking in Beijing.
Oh, yes.
I saw your bicycle. It was fun. Tell me more about, what was it like to be now living in China, living in Beijing for you as a diplomat and also as someone who is curious about cultures of other countries?
Beijing is rich in culture and historical sites, as well as culinary. So you can explore that during your presence here. And then to explore the cultural site and the culinary as well, one of the way to do that is through cycling.
I'm looking forward to have a biking trip with you and your wife maybe in Beijing in the future.
Let's do it. You will discover a lot of things here in Beijing.
As the ambassador to China, you have been over the past years working with your counterparts as well as those ambassadors from various countries to work on this very important occasion. Tell me more about your interactions with them on some crucial issues we're facing together.
In fact, we were able to establish a good relation, in fact, with my counterpart here, in particular with the foreign ministry here. Because when we received the information that Indonesia to become president of G20, so our presidency, starting from 2022. Since then, we were able to communicate each other with the officials here, how to prepare better, and in particular, the visit of the Foreign Minister, State Councilor Wang Yi to Indonesia. So thank you very much for that support from your side, from your government, and open communications. And at the same time as well, I was able to establish a communication with the member of the G20, so ambassador of the member of the G20 here in Beijing to exchange views on the current situations, how our presidency, in particular the theme of our presidency of the G20, recover together, recover stronger. So that's the theme of presidency of Indonesia. And then, of course, everybody at the time was looking forward as well to the meeting in Bali, because we were discussing whether 20 foreign ministers will be present in Bali, all of them, and then how Bali can create an ambiance as well for them to meet each other. So before the meeting, a lot of discussions, a lot of preparations, and then Jakarta keep asking me as well on the, not only on substantive discussions, substantive issues, but most important thing is the presence of the State Councilor Minister Wang Yi in Bali. So thanks that he's coming to Bali.
And thanks to the groundwork you and many others from these G20 countries have been doing. Mr. Ambassador, thinking about the broad topics that G20 has been focusing on with the ever-changing world, not only bilateral issues, but also crises like energy crisis, food crisis, as well as the pandemic and health, and also even some of the geopolitics and conflicts. How do you see China and Indonesia will be able to cooperate as two of the largest emerging and developing countries on this platform?
Thank you very much for answering me, for asking me that question. In fact, before the situation in Ukraine happened, we already established 3 priorities for our G20 presidency. The first one is the global health infrastructures. This is the lesson learned from pandemic. The second one is the digital transformation. We are entering the new era now. We are not entering, but in fact, the new era is already here. So, and then the third one is the new energy transition as well, renewable energy. So those are the 3 priorities. And then, because of the situation in Ukraine, so here comes something else that we need to inject into the priority. So what was happened in Bali during the G20 foreign ministers meeting, 2 issues that were discussed. number one is multilateralism, because we need to bring everybody to sit together in the multilateral set to resolve the issue. And number two, due to the situation now, we are facing with the energy and food crisis, energy and food security. So those two topics were discussed at the Foreign Minister meeting, G20 in Bali.
Talking about some of the key words you just mentioned, the security crisis, for example, food and energy. Indonesia is an important producer of energy resources for many countries in this region and beyond. The food as well. If you just think about the exports and imports Indonesia has been doing with players in the region. So what is your thinking? What is the logic behind the suggestions Indonesia brought out?
Yes, because the severe impact of the war in Ukraine, it's already happened. And in particular, the victims of the developing countries. So this is the thing that we think that we should discuss seriously, try to find a sort of solution. For that very reason that my president, after attending the G7 meeting in Germany, he visited as well Kiev and Moscow to meet both presidents and to at least bridging the communication gap between two. And then issues that he was brought up is the situation of energy and food crisis. So this is one of the issues. We pay a closer attention on that as a priority now. And then in small part, Indonesia could play that role as well. So through the G20 meeting and through the dialogue between my president with the leaders of the G20, because he's actively having a conversation with the leaders of the G20 as well, how to find a solution to this problem. And of course, he's been in conversation with the president of China, President Xi Jinping. Amazingly, that for the last 2 years, my president was able to establish a conversation. For the last 2 years, they discussed many things, health, and recently, of course, energy and food security. So the contribution of China will be substantive as well in trying to find a solution to this current crisis.
Mr. Ambassador, coming from Asia yourself, you know there is something about Asian culture that put trust at the very top of priorities between person to person. So how do you see, our common understanding about trust and the importance of it play its role in making sure the success of G20 this time, foreign ministers meeting, but also real interactions among, the diplomats in Asia?
I will take an example of ASEAN. Every year, leaders of ASEAN will meet each other at the formal setting, at the informal setting. This is the way in which communication among them was established on 8 August 1967. So that because of the communication and the trust, the habits of dialogue, we are able to establish the habit of dialogue among us.
It's beautifully
so
said.
If the habit of dialogue is there, then even though it doesn't mean that we have a problem, we don't have a problem. Yes, we have a problem among us, but through habits of dialogue, open communication, trust established, then we discuss how, the leaders, not us, the leaders discuss how we can find a solution to our problem.
Mr. Ambassador, earlier in a conversation with you, I got to learn that you emphasize on 3 pillars of relations. Yes. For example, about politics, economics and trade ties, and certainly people to people. In your post, how do you see the importance of this? What have you been doing in terms of people to people ties between Indonesia and China, given the complex situation of geopolitics and also the complex situation of prevention and control of the pandemic?
Since 2013, Indonesia and China was able to elevate our relations. We used to be strategic partnership, Now we are the comprehensive strategic partnerships. So in the diplomatic terminology, it has to be strong relation within three pillars: politics, economy, and social culture. But I do believe that if the strong foundation for the third pillar, social culture, people to people, is there, then if we are facing a problem in those two pillars, the bouncing back will be very fast. So for example, here in Indonesia and China relations, before COVID-19, a lot of exchange of culture existed between us. We sent the cultural group from Indonesia to come and perform here, as well as from China to Indonesia. That's number one. Number two, for the young people. So to establish a conversation between young people, in particular students at the university. Before the COVID-19, there were more than 15,000 Indonesian students pursue their higher education here in China, as well as from China to Indonesia. And the other thing is languages. So we were able to establish as well the China Center or China Cultural Center in Indonesia, as well as Indonesian Cultural Center at the university here. Now we are still working on that. In fact, I have an idea. How about we create the social media community between Indonesia and China? Because this is a lesson learned from what's been organized by ASEAN China Center to have a ASEAN and China social media meeting. It was held in Fuzhou recently, I think early this year. So based on that, maybe we could create as well ASEAN-China social media community or Indonesia-China social media community.
I understand tourism and trade in Indonesia are bouncing back.
Right.
As we are experiencing the current stage of COVID. So how do you see the future road ahead and blueprint ahead in terms of dealing with COVID, but at the same time be able to improve the interactions, whether it's tourism or other areas?
Yes, we, in fact, starting from last year, we already opened Bali. And then from March this year, we opened Bali. We reopened Bali again because the herd immunity with vaccine, thanks to vaccine from China, already reached 100%. The booster, 50%.
Wow.
And then the contribution of the, I call it tourism economy, to our economy is around 5 to 6% to our GDP. That's before COVID. But during COVID, of course, we understand that. So tourists starting to come now to Bali. And then, of course, the government welcome very much tourists to return to Bali, and in particular from China, because before COVID 2019, China was the #1 tourist coming to Indonesia, and of course through Bali. So, looking forward to the returning of the tourists from China to Bali. So, tourism economy will play a role as well in our economy. That's the reason why we put a priority on the tourism sector in Indonesia. It's already started now. It's already started. We have a Bali. We have we call it 10 Bali plus other cities in Indonesia. So with the presence of the more than 20 foreign ministers in Bali during the G20 foreign minister meeting, in fact, we showed to the world that Bali is open now. So we do hope that through the G20 and then a lot of meetings is going to be held in Bali to include summit. Of course, it will bring a positive image on Indonesia through Bali.
It seems that there's a lot of messages, positive ones, being sent out through the Bali G20 foreign ministers meeting. One of it is the bilateral meeting between your president and also the State Council Foreign Minister Wang Yi, as well as the two counterparts, the foreign ministers of both countries. And I remember there's a readout coming from both sides talking about the model of bilateral relations between China and Indonesia, and both sides applauded that. Tell me more about your understanding of this model.
In fact, in Bali, we have a first bilateral meeting between Foreign Minister of Indonesia, Mrs. Retno Marsudi, with Foreign Minister of China, His Excellency Mr. Wang Yi. That's the first one. And then the second one is the high-level setting. So, Foreign Minister Wang Yi as a state councillor with the coordinating minister for investment and maritime, co-chair with Foreign Minister of Indonesia. So high-level meeting was held in Bali as well. And then the third one is the courtesy visit of State Councillor Foreign Minister Wang Yi with his delegations to my President Joko Widodo. So three settings of the meetings. This is the reflections of the relationship between two countries. For me, because we were able to establish a trust among us, we are facing as well with some issues, but through the dialogue among us, and then looking at the setting of the meetings in Bali and Indonesia, we were discussing about the current relations and what we should do for the future. So it's a good setting for a bilateral of Indonesia and China. Even at the meeting between State Councillor Wang Yi and President Joko Widodo, they were talking about project that already existed and we are going to do in the future between two countries.
Concrete contents.
For example, the highway speed train from Jakarta to Bandung, and other cooperation as well. Health cooperation, because vaccine, China supported Indonesia to become the manufacture hub in the region for vaccine and medical devices manufacture. So this is the concrete things, and it brings benefit to the people. If the people can receive the benefit of the cooperation, and I think we are doing something right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador, for being with us.
You're most welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.